Hey book readers, good books don't have to be long books. I've found across my reading that you can have really short novellas that are really good. And they win awards. So today I'm presenting 10 award-winning books under 300 pages. Up first is Nettle Bone by T. Kingfisher. This was 272 pages and it won the 2023 Hugo Award. Nettle Bone is a dark fairy tale in which Mara, the youngest princess from a small kingdom, has learned that her oldest sister was killed by an abusive prince who's now remarried to Mara's other sister, and he's hurting her as well. So Mara, who's been training to become a nun, she's kind of been cast aside by her family, she decides that she's going to do something about this prince who's hurting her sister. And the crew she teams up with includes a witch who can speak to the dead, a fairy godmother, and a knight. What I really like about this book is how Kingfisher puts Mara in this really precarious political position where you sense the tension Mara experiences. Like one misstep by her could wind up just like meaning her kingdom is overthrown, meaning her sister is killed. There's a lot going on. So yeah, I describe this as a grown-up fairy tale adventure. There's magic and romance, but also on the darker side of things, there's domestic violence that Mara is having to deal with. And one final thing that stands out is how the main female characters are women rather than teenage girls, which is something kind of unusual and unique that you don't see all that often. They're strong, they're independent, and they live in this realistic but broken world. And even though the book takes place, in a fairy tale one. Up next is Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This was 224 pages, and it won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. This book alternates settings between a horrifying Florida reform school in the 1960s and New York a few decades later. It features the protagonist, Elwood Curtis, who's an intelligent, promising black young teen about to go to college in the 1960s. However, there's an unlucky set of circumstances which sees him winding up at Nickel Academy instead. Nickel Academy is this segregated school for juvenile delinquents where the black students are mistreated at every step. And like I said, Nickel Boys is a tough read at times. It's filled with cruelty, corruption, racism, and violence, and because of that, there's this helplessness, hopelessness that hangs over the whole thing. The writing by Whitehead is raw, yet beautiful, as it explores how past pains can haunt us the rest of our lives well into the future. And over the course of the novel, Nickel Academy, its students and those in power come to life in this really authentic, terrible way. Up next, I'm going to quickly talk about The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which is 208 pages and won the 2016 Man Booker International Prize. This is a short and strange horror novella focused on a woman who suddenly refuses to eat meat, thus the title The Vegetarian. It's a nightmarish ride from the protagonist's simple decision, again, no more meat, to her subsequent actions, which are horrifying, and then there's this really startling confusion as well. So you better hang on to something while you read this one. It's a little creepy. Next on my list is Lost Horizon by James Hilton. This is 241 pages long, and it won the 1934 Hawthornden Prize. After surviving a plane crash in the Himalayas, a military man named Hugh Conway stumbles upon a mythical utopia, the land of Shangri-La. Sounds pretty sweet, right? Yeah. You avoid death and then basically find the secret to eternal life. It's pretty good deal. But Hugh eventually has to choose between staying in this paradise or returning to the outside world, and there's pros and cons either way. And what I enjoyed about Lost Horizon is how it's philosophical without being boring. There's a lot of introspection and deep conversations in the book that never stall out. On the flip side, though, I guess, it's not action-packed necessarily. There are long periods where Hugh is just exploring the monastery that he's staying at in the mountains and then slowly unpackaging the secrets that this place in this world contains. And yeah, the book does show a bit of its age in the dialogue and the characters, just a smidge, but overall it's got a breathtaking setting and interesting concepts which more than make up for its faults. Another book under 300 pages that some of y'all have probably read is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is 287 pages long, and it won the 2007 Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Ash, gray, and cold. Those are the descriptions I'd use as I'm describing the world of this classic dystopian masterpiece. And that's because the story takes place after some extinction-level event. It's a brutal setting where almost everything, especially strangers, are to be feared. It's basically everything is out to kill you. The two main characters are a father and son journeying through this deserted wasteland, hoping to make it to the coastline. And all they have is hope and each other. It's slow and methodical, but thrilling nonetheless. There's this tension to it. And while the writing is gritty and the story is far from happy, like I said, it's a great tale about human resilience and the bonds of family. Up next is Piranesi, and this is 272 pages long, and it won the 2021 Women's Prize for Fiction. This book mixes fantasy, mystery, and science fiction as the pieces of the story begin to settle into place. Like a puzzle without a box for guidance, you're immediately thrust into the disorienting experience of being inside Piranesi's head, and your task as the reader is to try and make sense of this nonsensical world that Piranesi lives in. But most of the mind-boggling details about our protagonist and the setting are slowly revealed over time and eventually understood in the end. So any frustration you initially experience, it's worth it in the end. And that's because this book eventually hooks you as you scramble to figure out exactly what's going on. The next book on my list is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This is only 194 pages long, and it won the Retro Hugo. It's a sci-fi classic that takes place in a dystopian future where the job of a fireman is to burn books. The main character, Guy Montag, is a fireman who begins to question his job description and the dangers that books actually pose. Eventually, he starts contemplating the value of quality content, like what you'd find in books. Fahrenheit 451 is about the results of censorship and the importance of questioning those in authority and the reason behind the things that we do. And this book's message about content might be even more relevant today than when it was published in 1953 because of how easy it is to just lazily scroll through social media, binge shows, and stare at our phone rather than talk to people in social settings. Next up is Less by Andrew Sean Greer. This was only 272 pages, and it won the 2018 Pulitzer Prize for fiction. In order to avoid going to the wedding of a former partner, Arthur Less throws himself into working on new projects and attending literary events all over the world. Les is in a funk, and as he approaches his 50th birthday, and he's mourning the loss of his youth, his career, and his love life. But I think one of the biggest themes of this book is that fear of aging. Arthur Less doesn't want to get older at all. Not at all. He dreads turning 50, and he basically wants to remain young forever. He's got kind of a Peter Pan vibe to him. He's a sad but really likable character, and he's also accidentally funny, which is something I really liked about him. For instance, he overestimates his ability to speak German, which I'm sure comes from reality. You know, a lot of people do this. So when Les is speaking to native speakers, he sounds like a child rather than how he actually envisions himself, which is this really well-spoken guy who can talk in German. Also, this book is set all over the world, which makes it really fun. It's like a globe-trekking adventure read. Les visits New York City, San Francisco, Mexico City, Berlin, Paris, Italy, Morocco, and one or two others. It's cool to experience the culture through his eyes, which, like I said, really unique eyes, got a lot going on. Another book that clocks in at under 300 pages is This Is How You Lose a Time War by Amal Al-Motar, which is only 208 pages, and it won the Nebula, Locus, and Hugo Awards for Best Novella. This is a short and sweet sci-fi gem that throws a dash of romance into the mix. It's not something that you see every day in the sci-fi world, but this book pulls it off beautifully. It reminded me a bit of the confusing world of Christopher Nolan's movie Tenet, if anybody's watched that. But this is way more understandable. And while it takes place during a war, the writing is beautiful, kind of contrasting that. And that's what makes this book even more unique. The basic plot is that there's a time war going on, and the characters Red and Blue are on opposite sides of the battle and live at different times. And through a series of poetic letters exchanged across timelines and realities, their relationship evolves. And amongst this brutal time battle, these two characters show the best of humanity. A tender vulnerability that's oddly out of place considering the conflict happening around them. Since they're supposed to be enemies, though, there are risks and consequences to their forbidden love. But soulmates gotta do what soulmates gotta do. In short, it's about the resilient nature of connection between two people, no matter the time or place. And last on my list is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is only 122 pages and it won the Retro Hugo. This classic uses a group of farm animals to look at the rise of totalitarianism, the corruption of ideals, and basic human nature. A pig named Old Major leads the animals in an uprising against their oppressive human farmer, Mr. Jones. And after they take over the farm, they create a new government and promise equality and better living conditions. But the pigs in power become tyrants, eventually being just as bad or maybe even worse as the humans that they overthrew. So basically, even though they had these big hopes and dreams for the farm, nothing changes. The book does a great job of explaining in basic terms to political dummies like me the dangerous relationship between politics, propaganda, and power. There you have it, 10 award winners that are under 300 pages in length. Let me know in the comments what other books you can think of that fall into this category, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy reading!